The night Jordan discovered the truth, he realized he was nothing more than a paycheck. The thought hit him like ice water pouring over his skin. He had always suspected Stephen and Linda Carter didn't love him the way they pretended to, but seeing the truth in black and white was something else entirely. The old wooden floor groaned under his weight as Jordan crept into Stephen's office, each step betraying him with a sharp squeak. The air smelled of stale coffee and polished leather, heavy with the weight of secrets. His shadow stretched unnaturally long across the carpet, trembling with every movement of his hands. He swallowed hard. His throat was dry, his palms damp with sweat. For a moment he thought about turning back, slipping into bed and pretending this never happened. But then he remembered the bruises hidden beneath his sleeves, the cold stares at the dinner table, the way Linda's syrupy voice turned venomous when no one else was around. If he didn't find proof tonight, no one would ever believe him. Jordan's fingers brushed across stacks of bills and loose envelopes until they landed on a thick folder labeled Financial Records. His stomach twisted. He opened it, and the numbers leapt off the page like accusations. Thousands of dollars flowing in every month, foster care subsidies, community donations from their church, special assistance funds. And the expenses? Designer handbags, weekend getaways, gourmet restaurants. Not a cent spent on him. His knees weakened. A wave of betrayal crashed over him, so strong it nearly drove him to the floor. All this time, every fake smile, every staged hug in front of the congregation, it was all theater. They hadn't taken him in because they cared. They had taken him in because he was profitable. Jordan pulled out his old phone, its cracked screen glowing faintly in the dark. He snapped photo after photo, the click of the shutter unbearably loud in the suffocating silence. Each flash felt like a flare fired into the night sky, a signal begging to be caught. His pulse thundered in his ears. He kept moving, page after page, trying to steady his trembling hands. And then, footsteps. Slow, heavy, coming down the hallway. Jordan froze. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, closer, closer. His lungs locked. He squeezed himself tighter against the desk, willing his body to disappear into the shadows. The doorknob rattled. A voice hummed from the other side, casual, almost careless. Stephen's voice. Jordan's heart stuttered. The door creaked open. Light spilled across the floor, slicing through the darkness and falling directly on Jordan's shoes. He held his breath, chest aching, phone clenched in his fist. If Stephen took one more step, if he looked to the left, Jordan's world would end right there. The seconds stretched, each one heavier than the last. Jordan could hear Stephen shuffling papers on the desk, muttering under his breath. The smell of his cologne filled the room, sharp and suffocating. Jordan's mind screamed, "Please, just leave! Please don't see me!" Stephen lingered. He tapped a pen against the desk. He sighed. And then, mercifully, his footsteps retreated. The door clicked shut. Jordan stayed crouched in the shadows, muscles locked, until the silence swallowed everything again. Only then did he dare to move. He crawled out from under the desk, knees shaking, lungs burning from holding his breath so long. His phone trembled in his hands. The photos were there, the evidence he had prayed for. But along with them came a terror he couldn't shake. If Stephen had turned his head a fraction more, Jordan wouldn't be alive to hold this phone. He pressed the device against his chest, eyes stinging. The truth was now in his hands. But so was the risk of being discovered. For the first time, Jordan understood. Surviving this house meant more than silence. It meant courage. And tonight, courage had nearly cost him everything. If you believe justice must be served, hit like and subscribe right now. This story is far from over. Will Jordan win back his freedom or be buried under their lies? Stay tuned to find out. Morning light seeped through the thin curtains of the Carter house, but it did nothing to warm the air inside. Jordan sat at the kitchen table, staring into a bowl of cereal that had long since gone soggy. Stephen scrolled on his phone at the head of the table, expression carved from stone. Linda fluttered around the kitchen, her movements precise and deliberate, as if rehearsed for an audience that wasn't there. To anyone outside, they looked like the perfect family. Stephen Carter, respected in the church community, his wife Linda, always smiling and generous with neighbors. And Jordan, the foster child they had saved, the living proof of their charity. But Jordan knew better. The moment the door shut, the masks slipped. Smiles curdled into sneers. Sweet words became daggers. Meals were rationed, every mistake magnified, every silence punished. Jordan's stomach knotted as Linda set down a plate of toast in front of him. Her voice dripped with honey, but her eyes cut like glass. "Eat up, sweetheart. You'll need your strength for school." Stephen didn't look up, but his voice rumbled low, meant only for Jordan's ears. "And don't forget who keeps that roof over your head." Jordan forced a nod, chewing mechanically. The bread tasted like ash in his mouth. At school, it wasn't much better. Jordan kept to himself, head down, sleeves tugged over his arms. Most classmates ignored him. Others mocked him in whispers. But one boy didn't. Malik! He had transferred in just 2 weeks earlier, and unlike the others, Malik didn't let Jordan's silence push him away. He was sharp-eyed, easygoing, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen more than he said. "You always eat alone?" Malik asked one lunch period, sliding his tray across from Jordan's. Jordan shrugged. "I like it quiet." Malik studied him for a moment, then smirked. "Good. Quiet's better. Means I can talk as much as I want." He launched into a story about his old school, about kids who thought they were tough until they met the wrong person. Jordan listened in spite of himself. For the first time in a long while, the silence at his table wasn't crushing. It was shared. Days turned into weeks. Malik kept showing up, at lunch, in gym, sometimes even walking partway home with Jordan. And though Jordan rarely spoke, Malik never seemed to mind. One afternoon in the locker room, Malik caught sight of a faint bruise peeking from under Jordan's sleeve. His smile faltered. "What happened there?" Jordan yanked the fabric down. "Nothing. Just bumped into something." Malik's eyes narrowed. He didn't push, but he didn't believe him either. That night, Jordan sat in his room, staring at the crack of light under his door. Voices drifted up from the living room. Stephen and Linda, arguing in hushed but vicious tones. "We can't let anyone at church start asking questions," Linda hissed. "They won't," Stephen shot back. "As long as the boy keeps his mouth shut, we're untouchable. No one believes a foster kid over us." Jordan curled tighter into himself, clutching the faded photo of his real parents he kept hidden under his mattress. His father's steady hand rested on his shoulder in the picture, his mother's smile still bright despite the years gone. He whispered to the darkness, voice trembling, "I miss you." Sleep didn't come easy that night. And when morning finally arrived, Jordan carried the same heaviness with him back to school. Ms. Rivera noticed. She had been watching him for weeks. The exhaustion etched into his face, the way he flinched at sudden sounds, how he sat in the back of class, shrinking into himself. She was young, sharp, and determined not to look away from what others ignored. As the students filed out for recess, she stopped Jordan at the door. "Jordan, stay a moment, please." He froze. His first instinct was fear. But Ms. Rivera's tone wasn't sharp. It was gentle, careful, as though she was trying not to startle him. She leaned against her desk, arms folded loosely, eyes warm but searching. "Are you okay?" Jordan nodded too quickly. "I'm fine." Her gaze didn't waver. "You don't have to tell me now, but if something's wrong, I want you to know you're not alone." The words lingered long after he left the classroom. For the first time in months, Jordan wondered if someone might actually see him. Not as a burden, not as a paycheck, but as a boy worth saving. The Carter household was quiet that evening. Too quiet. Jordan sat stiffly at the dinner table, his fork scraping against the plate of overcooked chicken Linda had set in front of him. The ticking of the clock on the wall was louder than usual, every second drilling into his nerves. "Pass the salt," Stephen said suddenly, voice sharp. Jordan jumped, fumbling with the shaker. His elbow clipped his glass of water. It toppled, spilling across the table in a rush that soaked the tablecloth. The silence that followed was crushing. Stephen's chair scraped back against the floor, the sound jagged as broken glass. His face darkened, veins twitching in his neck as he loomed over Jordan. "You can't even hold a glass properly?" His voice was low, almost calm, and far more dangerous than if he had shouted. Jordan's hands shook as he tried to mop the spill with a napkin. "I'm sorry." Stephen's hand clamped down on his wrist, fingers digging in like iron. Pain shot up Jordan's arm, his breath catching. Stephen leaned in close, his breath hot against Jordan's ear. "One more mistake, boy, and you'll regret it." Linda's voice cut through, sweet but brittle. "Stephen, he's just a child." "Shut up," Stephen snapped, not looking at her. His grip tightened, and Jordan bit down on his lip to stop from crying out. Finally, Stephen shoved him back into his chair with a grunt of disgust. Jordan's chest rose and fell, his sleeve hiding the fresh bruise already forming. That night, lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling, wide-eyed. From downstairs, voices rose again. Stephen and Linda locked in another argument. "You're spending too much," Linda hissed. "The church is going to notice." "They won't," Stephen said with a laugh that was nothing but sharp edges. "We put on a show, remember? They see us as saints. Meanwhile, that boy keeps the checks rolling in. Easy money." Jordan's stomach churned. He clutched the faded photograph under his pillow. His mother's smile frozen in time, his father's hand resting on his small shoulder. Tears blurred his vision. "I just want to go home," he whispered. The next day at school, Jordan moved like a shadow, eyes down, words caught in his throat. But Malik noticed. "Hey, what's wrong?" Malik pressed as they walked off the playground. Jordan shook his head. "Nothing." Malik stopped, grabbed his shoulder gently. "Jordan, I know what nothing looks like. That's not it." Jordan's lips trembled, but he couldn't force the words out. He only shrugged Malik off and hurried ahead. But later, when Malik saw Jordan wince from simply lifting his backpack, suspicion hardened into certainty. That evening, Jordan sat alone in his room, listening to the Carters' muffled laughter echo through the walls, a performance for the neighbors. He felt trapped, suffocating inside a prison built of smiles and lies. And then he remembered Ms. Rivera's words. "You're not alone." But were they true? Could anyone really believe him over Stephen and Linda Carter? As the night deepened, Jordan turned to the cracked phone hidden under his mattress. His thumb hovered over the record button, his heart pounding. He knew one thing now. Silence would no longer save him. The next few days passed like a blur, each one heavier than the last. Jordan carried the bruise on his wrist like an invisible brand. He kept tugging his sleeve down, but every movement sent a reminder of Stephen's grip. At school, he moved slower, quieter, his eyes darting toward every sound as though danger followed him there too. Malik noticed immediately. "You're different," Malik said one afternoon, lowering his voice as they sat under the bleachers. "Something happened at home, didn't it?" Jordan's gaze fell to the dirt between his sneakers. "You don't get it. If I say anything, they'll make me regret it. Malik leaned forward, his tone sharp with certainty. That's what they want you to think. But silence just keeps you trapped. Jordan didn't answer. His throat locked around the words he couldn't say. That night, the house felt colder than usual. Stephen barely spoke during dinner, but the weight of his silence was worse than any outburst. Linda, on the other hand, performed her role perfectly. She smiled at Jordan, called him sweetheart when she passed him the bread, even touched his shoulder as if affectionately. But her hand pressed just a little too hard, a warning disguised as tenderness. Later, Jordan lay awake, staring at the sliver of light under his door. He could hear their voices again. "You lost control," Linda whispered harshly. "What if he shows someone that bruise?" "He won't," Stephen muttered. "The boy knows what'll happen if he opens his mouth." "And if he doesn't? Then we'll make sure he learns." Jordan's chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. He curled around the faded photograph of his parents, clutching it so tightly the edges bent. The following morning, Ms. Rivera caught him before class. "Jordan," she said softly, "you look exhausted." "I'm fine," he lied, the words automatic. Her eyes lingered on him. She didn't push, but she didn't look away either. That gaze, the steady patience in it, burned into Jordan more deeply than any reprimand could. At recess, Malik pressed again. "You can't keep doing this, man. I've seen kids like you before. I've been that kid before." Jordan finally looked at him, eyes glistening. For a moment it seemed he might speak, but the fear clamped down again. He shook his head and turned away. That afternoon, Stephen showed up at school. His car gleamed in the sunlight, freshly polished, the perfect picture of a successful foster parent. He stepped out, all smiles and charm, greeting teachers with a handshake, neighbors with a wave. When he reached Jordan, he placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. "Ready to head home, champ?" Stephen asked warmly, loud enough for others to hear. Jordan's body stiffened under his grip. His eyes stayed down, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, sir." Ms. Rivera watched from the doorway. Something in her gut twisted. She saw the way Jordan's shoulders hunched, the way Stephen's hand gripped just a little too tightly, and for the first time she realized whatever was happening inside that house wasn't just neglect. It was control, domination, fear. That night, Jordan sat in his room, the sound of Stephen's laughter echoing through the walls. It was a performance, like always, but Jordan knew the man behind the curtain now. And he knew one truth with absolute certainty. If he didn't find a way to fight back, the Carters would bury him alive in silence. The days blurred together, but Jordan's nights remained restless. Sleep came in fragments, each one shattered by the sound of footsteps echoing in his head. Sometimes he woke with his shirt clinging to his skin, gasping for air, convinced Stephen was standing right above him. One night, when the moonlight spilled across the floor like a silver blade, Jordan reached under his mattress and pulled out the old shoebox he kept hidden. Inside lay the few relics of a life that felt more like a dream now. The faded photo of his parents, a birthday card written in his mother's careful handwriting, and a single key. Its origin, a mystery even to him. He rubbed the card between his fingers, tracing each letter. "To my sweet Jordan, never forget. You are stronger than you think." His throat tightened. Stronger than he thought? At that moment, he felt like nothing more than a shadow surviving in someone else's house. The next day at school, Ms. Rivera asked him to stay behind again. "Jordan, I see you," she said gently. "I see the way you carry yourself. And I know something's wrong." Jordan shifted, eyes glued to the floor, his hands clenched into fists. You don't understand, he whispered. Then help me understand, Ms. Rivera urged. Because no child should look this tired. No child should look this afraid. Her words pressed against the wall he'd built around himself. Cracks began to show. He wanted, needed to believe someone could help. But fear still wrapped around him like barbed wire. Malik noticed, too. That afternoon, he followed Jordan out of school. You can't keep this inside forever, Malik said. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're not. You're just giving them more power. Jordan opened his mouth, then shut it again. His voice broke. They'll hurt me if I talk. Malik's jaw tightened. Then let me help. Let someone help. That night, Jordan clutched the shoebox again, holding the photograph and the card close. His parents' smiles gave him the strength to whisper words he hadn't said out loud before. I don't want to be afraid anymore. The next morning, something inside him shifted. He slipped his cracked phone into his pocket, heart racing with the weight of his decision. He would start recording. Not just numbers on a page this time, but the voices, the threats, the truth that no one could deny. And for the first time in a long time, Jordan didn't feel completely powerless. He felt prepared. Jordan woke with a decision burning in his chest. No more waiting. No more silence. The cracked phone in his pocket felt heavier than ever, not just a device, but a weapon, his only shield against the Carters' lies. That morning, Stephen barked orders from the kitchen while Linda rehearsed her sugary lines for Sunday's church service. Jordan sat quietly, spoon clinking against his bowl, every sound committing itself to memory. When Stephen's voice cut sharp, "Hurry up, boy, or I'll show you what happens to the lazy," Jordan slid his thumb over the record button in his pocket. A red light blinked silently. Evidence. Every cruel word was no longer just his burden. It was ammunition. At school, Malik caught up with him. "You look different," he said, studying Jordan's face. "Like you're carrying something." Jordan hesitated, then pulled him behind the gym. His hands trembled as he whispered, "I'm recording them." Malik's eyes widened. "That's dangerous." "I don't care," Jordan said. "I can't keep living like this." Malik swallowed hard, then nodded. "Good. But you're not doing it alone? You think you're the only one?" "My stepdad used to hit me. I know what it feels like to be scared in your own house." Jordan froze. Malik had never told anyone that. "I ran once," Malik continued. His voice cracked, but he held Jordan's gaze. "Didn't work. I ended up right back. But I learned something. Running doesn't change them. You need proof. You need people to see what they really are." Jordan's throat tightened. The loop was clear. Malik's past was now Jordan's present. And if he failed, it could become his future too. That night, Jordan lay awake again, phone gripped in his hand. From downstairs came the usual performance. Stephen laughing too loud, Linda clinking glasses, the perfect family show for whoever might be listening. When the laughter faded, Stephen's voice cut through the walls. "That boy's getting restless. If he tries anything, we'll shut him down." Linda finished coldly. Jordan pressed record. His pulse thundered, but his hand didn't waver. The next day, Ms. Rivera stopped him after class. "You look different," she said carefully. Jordan met her eyes, then glanced around the empty classroom. "For the first time," he whispered, "I have proof." Her heart clenched. She didn't push, didn't overwhelm him, but her voice was steady. "When you're ready, bring it to me. You don't have to do this by yourself." For the first time, Jordan felt something that had been absent for months. Hope. It was small, fragile, but it was real. He walked out of school that day with his shoulders a little straighter, his steps a little firmer. He still carried fear, but alongside it burned a spark of determination. The Carters had built a cage around him, but Jordan had found the key, and this time he was going to use it. The tension finally snapped one Friday evening. Jordan had been recording for days, each clip etched with threats, insults, and cold calculations between Stephen and Linda. His phone was filling fast, but with each file, his courage grew stronger. He was no longer just a boy enduring. He was building a case. That night, dinner was a staged performance as always. Linda laughed too sweetly. Stephen recounted stories to make himself sound like a pillar of the community. Jordan stayed silent, the phone hidden in his pocket, quietly capturing everything. But then Stephen noticed. "Why so quiet, boy?" His voice sliced through the air. "Got something to hide?" Jordan's chest tightened. He shook his head quickly, forcing out, "No, sir." Stephen's eyes narrowed. He reached across the table, snatching Jordan's backpack. Before Jordan could react, Stephen dumped it onto the floor. Books, pencils, and finally, the cracked phone. The room froze. Stephen picked it up, turning it in his hand. The red light blinked once before going dark. "What's this?" His voice was a growl now, stripped of its false charm. Jordan's heart pounded, words tangled in his throat. Linda's smile faded. "Stephen," she whispered, but her eyes burned with fury, too. Stephen stood, towering over Jordan. "You think you can spy on us? You think anyone will believe you over me?" For the first time, Jordan didn't shrink back. His voice trembled, but it carried. "They don't have to believe me. They'll hear you." Stephen's face twisted, rage overtaking him. He raised his hand, but before it fell, knocking echoed at the door. Everyone froze. "Mr. Carter?" It was Ms. Rivera's voice. "I just wanted to drop off some school materials for Jordan." Linda's face paled. Stephen clenched his jaw, fist still hovering. Slowly, he lowered it. Jordan's pulse raced. Ms. Rivera's presence was no coincidence. Maybe she'd seen more than she let on. Stephen shoved the phone into his pocket and hissed at Jordan. "One word and you'll regret it!" But something had changed. Jordan wasn't just a victim anymore. He had proof. And now, someone waiting outside who might finally listen. The knock at the door changed everything. Stephen's hand trembled as he gripped Jordan's cracked phone. Rage twisted his face. "This ends now," he hissed, raising it high, ready to smash it into pieces. But before the blow fell, the knock came again, louder this time. The door swung open. Ms. Rivera stepped inside, but she wasn't alone. A uniformed officer followed close behind. Stephen froze, phone still in his grip. The officer's voice cut through the silence. "Sir, I'll need to take that." Stephen's jaw clenched, but under the officer's stare, he had no choice. Slowly, he handed it over. The red light blinked once, showing the files were still intact. Jordan exhaled, his chest loosening with relief. That night, Jordan left the Carter house under Ms. Rivera's care. The very next morning, the courtroom filled with the Carters' own voices, Stephen's threats, Linda's cold bargains, echoing through the speakers. The truth was undeniable. The judge's gavel fell. The Carters were stripped of all foster rights, and Jordan was placed in a new home. From the gallery, Malik smiled through tears. He had seen his friend suffer too long, and now freedom had finally come. As Jordan stepped out of the courthouse, spring sunlight touched his skin. His mother's words, saved from that old card, rang inside him. "You are stronger than you think." Jordan was no longer trapped. He had freedom, he had hope, and for the first time, he truly believed he would find a family that loved him. This story reminds us that truth and courage can break even the darkest chains. If you believe justice must be served, hit like and subscribe. And share this story, because someone out there may need the hope it carries.